The livestock industry is a pillar of South Africa's farming economy. Why do I say that? If you look at the gross value added of the sector, which pretty much are their farming fortunes, about half of it is the livestock and poultry. That also then means that when we have a problem in the livestock industry, we cannot proceed for a long time talking about the growth of the sector. And I know that in 2025, we have been here in AgriView talking about the fact that the South African agricultural sector will experience a mixed recovery. And that mixed recovery is on the basis of the fact that in grains and oilseeds, sugarcane, as well as fruit and vegetables, we've actually recorded excellent yields. And because of that and the record harvest in some of the other crops, they've pushed our growth prospects to pretty much healthy levels, which is why at a national level, if you look at the growth figures in South Africa, everyone will be talking about the fact that agriculture is punching above its weight and doing reasonably well. But we know that that masks some of the difficulties that the farming industry in South Africa experiences. And it's because of the fact that the livestock industry is not in good shape. And the key challenge that this industry faces is what here on AgriView, in a very start, we discussed this matter, which is the issue of biosecurity. And when biosecurity, I'm basically referring to the challenge of both plant health and on animal health. And on the animal health aspect, the big thing in South Africa has been the foot and mouth disease in the cattle industry. And I know that if you talk to folks that are in the pig industry, they'll tell you about the African swine fever, which has been a major challenge for some time, but it is not the pressing issue right now. Those that are in the poultry industry, they will tell you about the avian influenza, which has also been a major issue in the recent past, but is not a challenge now. And some of you that observe these things closely, you will recall that somewhere around 2022, 2023, we actually even had a problem where in South Africa, there were concerns that we may have shortages of eggs. And one of the problems at the time is because we were affected by avian influenza and the country then ran into all kinds of difficulties. These were all signals that if we don't take care of animal health, we can experience problems. And when there are biosecurity challenges, animal health issues, it's not just the issue of farmers where you can say, okay, I stay in the city, I don't have to deal with any of the farming issue, it's none of my business. It's actually all of our business. And in fact, in other countries, I was recently in Australia, I know I'm showing off. I was recently in Australia, and one of the things that you get as you land are some of the big lessons about biosecurity, where they tell you about the importance of animal health and the importance of plant health. In fact, when you fly from any other region to another region, they all have all of these strict biosecurity controls. I'm bringing this thing up because not everyone in Australia is a farmer, but everyone that visits there, they get to be taught and reminded about the importance of biosecurity. And I think that alertness is something that as South Africans, we ought to have to ensure that we keep our system as well as our farming industry in pretty much in a healthy position. And I know this is going to be always difficult because what do you do if you are staying in a township and you don't have that much land and your cattle have to graze in between the houses and in some of the areas that is close by people? But also, what do you do if you stay in a village whereby you can't really be heading your cattle all along and you let them graze over there and sometimes they cross the roads? These are all of the practical issues that people face. But we know that in the past, the South African government always ensured that there is proper fencing that separates amasimi, which is where people plant, as well as amadlelo, which is where it's the grazing field, where the livestock can pretty much be. And at a minimal level, at least, there is a control in the movement of animals, because the lack of control in the movement of animals is what contributes to some of these challenges that we have. Because if animals are roaming around, whenever there is an outbreak on one area of any disease, it's easy for it to cross to another region. But if we are paying attention on the movement of animals, at least we can do something on controlling some of these diseases. This also then means that this is not just a challenge of a farmer or communities. It also means that the government has to do its own part. And this is all important so that ultimately as South Africa, we have a healthy livestock industry, but also we have generally a healthy food industry, which has to do with paying attention on ensuring that we deal with all of the animal health challenges. And now on this foot and mouth disease challenge in South Africa is what exactly has prompted now even a change in policy. Many of you probably heard that at the end of November, the Minister of Agriculture, Mr. John Steenhuisen, stood up at the African Farmers Association conference and say, hey, for the first time now in the recent years or democratic South Africa, we will be standing up and vaccinating every cattle in this country against foot and mouth disease. And many people will be asking about how will this happen? Should he be vaccinating my cattle? Is his vaccine healthy, or is it going to cause some difficulties for me in my livestock industry? And those are all legitimate questions. Because who knows, what if uzis unongqawuse kwakhona is bringing a nongqawuse? If you don't know what nongqawuse is, go Google it. There's a lot of issue with the livestock challenges in the Eastern Cape. But that's not the point. The issue of the vaccination is necessary on making sure that we keep our livestock or our cattle industries healthy. And it will be a big task, because that implies then that we have to be vaccinating about 12.1 million cattle. That's the national herd in South Africa. And of course, if you think about the commercial herd that ends up being processed and go to all restaurants and other chains where we consume our meat, that's about 7.2 million head of cattle. The 7.2 million can be vaccinated one way or another, because the people that are in the commercial space, they do have all of the handling facilities on ensuring that at least they can control their livestock. But that is just the 7.2 million of 12.1 million, which means then you still have other millions of cattle that will be out there, which are primarily in the former homelands, in the township, and all of those will need to be vaccinated. Because if you're only vaccinating what's in the commercial farms, you are not necessarily dealing with this disease. You will need to be vaccinating every cattle in this country. To do that, though, is not just an issue where we can say, okay, Minister Steenhuisen, you said it, go out there, vaccinate the cattle. No, it will actually need you, who's watching here, as well as your cousin, who you will tell about this recording, that, hey, Chief, we all need to come together to actually assist in handling all of this livestock, because the government alone is not going to be able to do it, but also our traditional leaders, community leaders. This is where I think that we need to actually bring in that leadership and assist the government in the vaccination process of this to ensure that they reach every corner in South Africa. Because if they don't reach other animals in your area, they're still leaving you at risk. And I think ultimately you want your cattle to be healthy, and the only thing then to ensure that you are able to have your healthy livestock is to assist the Department of Agriculture in achieving its goal of attempting to vaccinate about 12.1 million cattle in this country. And to the Department of Agriculture, there's a big task on you again, because the reality is that the Agricultural Research Council, as well as the OBP, which are state-owned institutions in South Africa, they do not produce sufficient vaccine or any of these vaccines that we actually need. And I know that the leadership at the Department of Agriculture has said they are working hard to revive the capacity of the ARC, the Agricultural Research Council, and the OBP to produce the vaccine. And that is commendable. It's something that we welcome. We want to see that, because these organizations had fallen under difficult times, and the revival of them is actually an important aspect, which we support you, DG and the Minister, in doing that aspect. But the reality of the matter is also that that is not going to be faster enough, and it may not be at the scale that we need, which is why I would put it out there and say what we perhaps need to do is also not to end our efforts on just saying, okay, we will import from Botswana, we will fix the ARC, maybe we will talk to Turkey and the others. Go out there, talk to Turkey, talk to Botswana, talk to some other people that may bring this vaccine, but most importantly, talk to the labs in South Africa. Because we do have the domestic scientists that can produce this. And I know that there are things that must be done by government and there are things that must be done by private sector. But we cannot just bring the private sector only at planning, even if they can have the capacity to produce. I think let's give them business. But as long as that business also assists in achieving our goal, then this is the shared prosperity between business, government, and community that we have to talk about. So beefing up the capacity and ensuring that the private sector is involved in this vaccination aspect is really something that we must do. So all in all, folks, the key thing is that the livestock industry is a pillar of the South African farming economy. You can't have a thriving maize industry without having a solid livestock industry. It's about half of our farming economy. And secondly, the fact that we are having all of these disease occurrences is not just the issue of the Department of Agriculture. Public Works needs to do its part on helping to ensure that they erect the fences that we used to have on separating and making sure that the movement of animals in our communities are handled pretty much well. And we must be aware and alive to the pressures that are in the townships. People do not have sufficient land. It's not like people are carrying, they're leaving their goats walking around, as some of you typically think. I mean, there are problems that are there in those communities that lead to people to having their animals going in that way. But also in the rural areas, there aren't a lot of people to be heading cattle and doing all of these aspects, which is why sometimes in the Eastern Cape, my home province, you will see cattle crossing the roads. But that still doesn't excuse the fact that traditional leaders, people in the communities that are available, they should help, which means controlling the movement of animals pretty much well. And when the government comes in to vaccinate, I think we should assist them and not view this as uguza uganona say. It's really something that is there to assist in making sure that the animals are in good health. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about, which is the context and perhaps maybe something that we need to do to support these efforts that are out there. Because animal health is important, biosecurity is important, and without us resolving these challenges, we will continue to have some troubles in South African agricultural sector. And I hope then that you'll be able to go out there and help. Thanks for watching and subscribe to our channel.